Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video. So this video is going to be kind of random, but I think nevertheless very important. This is something I wanted to talk about for a long time. I do not have any notes. I just wanted to come on here and speak freely about it and share my thoughts about this with you. And I just wanted to be like an unedited, very raw video where I just share my thoughts. And they might be a little bit unorganized, but please bear with me. I'm trying my best to get my point across. As I said, it's something very important. It is something that I think that the language learning community needs to understand. And I also think that it will definitely change the way you learn languages in the future, if you haven't thought about this before. So as you guys might know, I was a communications and languages student. I have a bachelor's in communications and languages. So communications and languages is obviously something that is very linked to each other, but not only communications, but identity. And this is something I learned not only during school, but it is something that I've been living and seeing my whole life, basically, how language is connected to identity. Language is not just a way of communicating yourself, of getting your point across in a different language, in a foreign language, but language is definitely a vehicle to show your identity and also kind of change your identity. And why am I saying change? Because with every language you speak, you take on kind of a new identity. This is something that happens with me too. I've seen it in some videos. People even comment like how my personality changes with the language I'm speaking. This is something that happens to most polyglots because this is something very natural, as language is so much linked to identity and personality. With every language, you don't only change your identity, but you change your personality. So that's why I'm saying with the language always comes a belief system. With the language always comes a structural system of a community. So even in one country, there could be so many different languages spoken, but the communities, you know, where the languages are spoken, have their set belief system. They have their set traditions. They have their set structures. So this is what you're taking on to, and this is what you're learning to when you're learning a language. So basically, you're not just learning a bunch of random words, but you're taking on this system too if you're learning a language. And with changing identity, I don't mean that I'm a complete different person when I speak a new language, but different parts of my personality come out. So for example, if I'm speaking German, you might notice meine Stimme ist sehr tief und ich bin gelassener, ich spreche ruhiger. You see the difference? So when I speak German, my voice is very deep. It goes even deeper than it already is in English. It's very deep, and the voice of tone also conducts the way I speak. So I'm not gonna speak as quickly. I'm not gonna be like more like agitated. I'm gonna be more calm and relaxed, you know. Wenn ich Deutsch spreche, bin ich ruhiger und meine Stimme ist gelassener. Also ich spreche nicht so, sondern eher so ruhig, weil das einfach die Sprache ist. This is the language that makes it like that, because the German language is just constructed like that, that you're of course gonna see people who are like, much like out, you know, but in general, the language is like that, that it's very deep, low. So when you're in a lower tone voice, it's more automatic that you're gonna be more calm speaking, you know. This is just the nature of a language. That's why when you imitate a German people speaking, then you're mostly gonna lower your tone of voice. You're gonna speak deeper, and you're gonna be more like, you know, a lot of people imitate a German like some war, like they would speak in some war movies, and I always tell people that it's not really how German speak. But you know, what I want to say is that the tone of voice is very important when you're speaking a new language. And with the tone of voice comes the way you speak, the manners you take on. So definitely keep in mind when you're learning a new language, you don't just learn the language, you basically take on a new identity of yours. You're not gonna throw out your identity, of course, but you take on a new side of yours, or a new side that is already within you is coming out. So another example is when I speak Spanish as opposed to speaking German. Wenn ich Deutsch spreche, bin ich so, also bin ich eher ruhiger. But in contrast, cuando hablo español, soy automáticamente más abierta y mi voz es más alta. Porque esa es la manera en que los españoles, los hispanohablantes hablan. Entonces es muy diferente a la manera de hablar alemán. Y claro, puede haber gente así y así. So there can always be people who are like that or people who are like that. But what I'm saying is, in general, when you see Spanish speaking people, you see that they're much more articulating with their body. They have, like, you know, more body gestures going on. Their hands are all up. And the voice of tone is much higher than in German. So that allows them also the shortness of the words, not necessarily shortness, but the words have more vocals, for example. So this is also gonna determine the speed of speech. So that's why you see a lot of Spanish speaking people speak quite fast. And even when I'm speaking German, I never get to that speed that a Spanish native would speak, because the words are just so long in German. It's not even possible to speak that fast in German. I don't know anybody who speaks that fast in German. Like, I know so many people who speak like very fast in Spanish. So that's just the nature of the language, which allows it to be spoken faster. So this is definitely something that determines also the way a language is spoken. So for example, when I speak Portuguese, then I'm also gonna be much more like in a mood like when I speak Spanish, so much more open. You know, maybe a little bit, I seem more like happier. People would say in my comments that I seem happier when I speak Spanish. I am definitely happy when I speak Spanish, or even Portuguese. It's just because I associate also not only with the language, I associate the culture. And the culture brings, like, you know, good memories, joy. I associate how people in that culture are, how most people in that culture are, how the culture is not only portrayed, but how I experience the culture, you know. So when I have been living, like when I lived in Spain, or like when I experienced things with my Spanish speaking friends, I see the way they are, which is a lot different than, for example, my German friends. But not to say that either one is better or worse than other one, but it's just a difference, you know, the difference in the culture, in the way people behave. So that's why you're gonna hear things like, you know, the Spanish speaking, they're much more outgoing, they're happier, they're, you know, things like that. And in general, this is like often the case. Like I could even compare with the group of sets of friends that I have, for example, my French friends, who are much more laid back, much more closed than, for example, my Spanish speaking friends, you know, my French Parisian friends, because Paris is different also from the rest of France. They have the particular Parisian way, which is much more closed, you know. Before they get to know a person, it might take a while to make even like friends, you know, and be very, very close to a person. And that is much more similar to the German way, as opposed to, for example, the Brazilians, who are very open, and basically the moment they meet you, you're already their friend. So this is what I'm saying. When I speak Portuguese, that is why I'm also like very, you know, open and very very open-minded in general, because this is the way most Brazilians I have met are. Like, 90% of the Brazilians I've met are like that. So this is why I'm automatically like that too when I speak Portuguese. And it's not just to imitate or mimic them, but this is something that you take on naturally with the language, you know. So that's definitely something I wanted to stress on and I wanted to talk about. And also, if you learn a language and you separate like identity and language, it is so much harder to learn the language because you're basically not understanding why people are the way they are. And it is super important to communicate effectively when you understand the people you're communicating with. So let's say you're doing business Spanish. So if you're doing business Spanish, it is good to learn the words, the vocabulary you might need, you know, to do successfully business with Spanish speaking people. But it is always better if you know their culture, if you know their identity, kind of. And this is something very important that I think most people forget, and I think more people should focus on. This is something I focused on like ever since I started learning different languages. That's why I said I was watching a lot of TV and stuff like that, because this is a way where you not only take on a new language or you learn a new language, but this is also a way where you learn about the culture. Like watching Brazilian telenovelas showed me how Brazilian culture is kind of set up, you know. So this made me understand some things that here wouldn't be the same way. So that's why when I went there for the first time, I've already had like a set of things that I learned about the culture. I didn't only learn Portuguese just blank like that without having any cultural information, but I basically got into it because of the culture, because of the dance, because of the music, because, you know, I got to see different cultural Brazilian things, and that is why I got into it and I got so interested. So that made me learn the language better and faster, even because I already had the cultural structure and kind of like the identity of the people who speak the language. Of course, when I went there, I learned a lot more. But this is something that is a very important, language and identity. So when you learn a new language, definitely always remind yourself that you're taking on a new system, basically, and that you need to let go in that moment of your system. So that is why when I'm speaking any of those languages I kind of leave my old identity and personality and take on a new one. It is basically like taking on a new jacket or taking on a new set of clothes like every day. When I speak Spanish, I take on a new set of clothes. Like I could be switching from here in a minute. I could be kind of like a different person, but that is natural. That is not like I'm saying something that I do on purpose. That is something that happens unconsciously, and that happens very naturally, and that is something that would definitely help you learn a new language easier, a lot easier, trust me. A good example where I see that is, for example, in my parents who speak several languages but who've never learned the languages at a language school or with apps or anything like that, but more so out of living in places where they lived alongside different communities, the people who were speaking different languages. Like for example, in Ghana, they're like just in one country there are over 50 languages, I think, and people say dialects, but those are not dialects. Those are completely different languages, and this is the case with most African countries. With India, for example, there are so many different ethnicities and so many different communities and cultures, and they have their set of own language, not dialect but language. So for example, I have a friend, she's Ghanaian too, but She speaks a whole set of different language than I do, but we're both from the same country. So it's kind of like Canada, you know, part speaks French and another part speaks English, but they're both Canadian. So, but just multiply that by like 50 times, because this is the amount of languages one African country can have. Or like India also has a bunch of different languages. So, or like the Philippines. So this also makes you take on a new identity by trying to communicate with a different community and with a different culture. So this necessity makes you learn a language also much easier, because I see it how people successfully speak 6, 7 different languages because simply having lived with different communities. And yeah, this is something I wanted to talk about, and I think this is very important. I think this will or might shift your view of language learning. And definitely tell me in the comments what you think about this. If you agree with some points, if you agree with all points, what you generally think, if you've ever even thought about this. So let me know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.